Hello, my name is Ricardo, and I'm going to be telling you all the line techniques which I've learned that's helped me in the past, and what's helped me right now actually, because I finished the play not too long ago, and I had lots of help with some line techniques, such as this, which I tend to do a lot, which is to highlight some of my lines. The reason why I highlight them is because I find it hard to just read lines where it's just like, I'll give an example, when it's just, oh, when it's just like this. So if someone tells me to like follow the lines, I find it very hard to actually keep up. I believe this is because of my dyslexia, and I don't know, to me it's very hard, and I sometimes skip over my lines when I'm reading, when it's not highlighted. But when my lines are fully highlighted, I tend to highlight cues as well, like just like little details. For example, if I can go, here we go, yeah. So here's one page. So as you can see here, some parts are pink, some parts are orange. The ones in pink are basically my lines, which is pretty simple. It's nice and bright, so I can't miss it. The orange ones is for stage directions. For example, one of my lines is here when I say, all right, new rule, that word is banned. That thing highlighted in orange is beat, which means pause. So I know that when I say this, I don't just say my line, then I say it again. I say the next line, but I say my line, there's a pause or a beat, same. There's a beat, then I say my line. I'll say the beat can be like at least three seconds at least. But I say my line and then pause and then that's it. Another one is where, here's another one. I say one of my lines here, and they say nothing. So basically, the people around me, they say nothing. So I've highlighted that as well, because once I get the lines under my belt, I can start looking at the blocking and the stage directions more. So that's why I sort of highlight both of them. But yeah, the highlighting technique and just all this helps me to actually not skip over lines really. There's another one which I used back like last year. It didn't really help, I'm not being honest, and this was given to a friend of mine. He told me that whatever sentence you have, write down the first letter in each word, and it will help you to like learn the word. So like if you forget it, you can just look at the word, and then it should draw like a memory. I don't know. To be honest, it seems like a last resort to me. It definitely wouldn't be like the first one I would go for. Like, to me, this seems to be like one of. It's good. Don't get me wrong. It's good. Like, it's helped a lot of people. Like, it's helped people from my class. It's helped people from other class. But to me, this, I I I would advise using this. Don't get me wrong. I would advise using this, but to me, it doesn't seem like it wouldn't work for me. But it is useful though, very useful. So you just basically write down the first letter of each word on a blank piece of paper. You learn your line, or try and learn that line, like try and learn that sentence, and then when you go through like the whole, or just like one page or so, if you forget it, just quickly look at that piece of paper, just go through it in your head. For example, one of mine is rip, or I just like thank you. So are things really that bad? If I'm like thank you, so are things really? Next word is be, so it will be pretty bad. Just stuff that I don't know. It kind of did help, but it's not my cup of tea for me. Another technique which I've learned is the sandwich technique, and this is for basically paragraphs or just monologues, stuff like that, really. And I used this recently, actually, when I was mess. I used this recently when I was reading out one of my monologues for casting and all that, because I wanted to play an intimidating character, and I found an intimidating monologue. But anyway, so I found this monologue. It's called Wasted Talent. It's about a guy called Dommy who's lost one of his close friends because he struggled with his music career, but he actually was really good with his music career. And I'm like, why did you kill yourself? Oops, spoiler. But basically, I found it very hard to like just read them out, because it's a lot. Like, to me, I'm like, this is so much for me to read. But I said, why don't split it up? Why don't I write it instead? I kind of gave you two techniques. But why don't I split it up, and why don't I make it bigger? So I decided to, instead of look at the script on some other website, I said, you know what, I'm just gonna copy it, put it on PowerPoint, make sure it's like from me, and make sure it's big and not small writing. Then it will help me. And look what happened. Big and yeah, so I can't miss it. And then afterwards, I decided to, break it down a bit. So I start off by saying like the first two sentences, and then, and then I will say it over and over again to the point where I'm sick of it, and then I'll go to the next section, and then afterwards I'll go to the next section, just over and over again. I call it the sandwich method because it's like you're making a sandwich. Like, you start with one of the sections of the sandwich. So you start with the bread, the tomatoes, lettuce, whatever you have on your sandwich, and then you finish off with the bread, and then you realize I just made a big sandwich. It's like this. Like, you're just going by line by line by line by line. Then you just realize I just read the whole of this monologue. I know it now. So that one helps me a lot with This one helps me a lot in monologues. I don't really get confused, or I don't get thrown off by it too much anymore because I use that method. And the highlighting method works out as well. I didn't highlight this one because this isn't the one which I highlighted. The one which I've highlighted is at home somewhere, but it's fine. I can easily do it again. That's another one of the methods. And yeah, they are. We've got the classic look, cover, and read, which I use as well. To be honest, that one's kind of useful as well. I do look at it, I do repeat it over and over and over in my head. I think what I do with my lines a lot is I tend to go around in different rooms and basically say one of my lines. That's another technique. Go around in, basically, if I have one of these monologues to say, I will find a section, read one of the sections in like this room, for example, and then the next section of the monologue I'll read in a different room, and then afterwards the ending part I'll read in another room. So I split it up into like beginning, middle, and end. So I find 3 rooms. I say the beginning in this room, I say the middle in another room, and I say the ending like downstairs, for example. That kind of helps me as well because it allows me to like, but I don't know how to say it, but it helps me understand. I'm trying to think of the best word for it. It's sort of like just breaking down the words, really. There's nothing really to it, but it does help, so that's the main thing. One which I was taught recently, this is the last technique, which I learned from one of my directors, it's like a physical movement one. So if I'm saying one of my monologues, which has to do with like dogs, or not dogs, like if one of my monologues, start again. If I'm struggling with one of my monologues and I'm reading through it and one of the sentences is to do with, I don't know, flying. So this is sort of, this technique is basically you have to do with 2 people. So if I'm reading it out to someone, one of my monologues, instead of them tell me you forgot this part, or they tell them what part you missed, they will actually do an action. So for example, if one of my next line had to do about flying, or just I say the word fly in it, they can be like, instead of actually tell me, any sort of movement to do, any sort of movement that is relevant to what I'm saying will just jog a memory like, oh wait, I know that part, it's to do about flies. Or if you're talking about eating for example, I can do something like, just anything like that will help draw their memory. It's funny because if I see people do the action, it will help me understand it more than someone actually reading it to me. Like, I understand, I'm a visual learner, basically. But yeah, they're mainly the techniques which I've used. Some are useful, some are not. I think my most useful one is the highlighter one. Like, I wouldn't be here now if I'd never used any of the highlighter techniques and the breaking down. And yeah, I've done a new one now, which is the action one. And again, I told you before that the first letter technique doesn't really help me, but it's still useful in a way. And yeah, that's more or less it. So these are all the line techniques which I use. So that's it for me.